My name is Laura Routh. I am very grateful for the invitation to come and speak to you today. When I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity as part of a colloquium class to come to a number of these forums and found them to be really interesting and educational. I want to give a couple of disclaimers before I kick off. While I am the 2013 chair of the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods, my comments today are my own. I don't represent LAN in terms of what I'm going to share with you, and I'm also not representing my employer. I have to give you that disclaimer. I'm also a bit under the weather, so please bear with me if I cough or stutter a bit. I'd like to share with you today some perspectives that I've had as a community activist, and also for the last 12 months having been the chair of the Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods. I have very thick skin, and so if anything I say today offends you or challenges you and you want to argue with me, bring it on. I'm happy to have the conversation. Next slide, please. I'm not going to give y'all a lot of answers today. What I will share with you are some questions. Just first, a little bit about Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods. We are a volunteer group that is represented by individual neighborhood association representatives that gather once a month. We meet the first Thursday of every month in the Hobbs Taylor Loft Capital City Bank Conference Room, 7 p.m. first Thursday of the month. Our meetings are public. Only appointed neighborhood representatives can vote, however, so we have a very democratic structure that's based on bylaws. And LAN has been around for a long time. In fact, we're lucky today to have, I think one of the original founding members at the table over here, Steve. And we also have CJ as a LAN member, Phil is a neighborhood person. So many of you may be aware of LAN. It's been around for quite a while. LAN's effectiveness, I think, has varied over time depending on what issues arose. And that's typically true for even individual neighborhood associations, often born out of crisis. Neighborhoods get organized and get cranky when something threatens them, and LAN is really no different. We've had, I think, a number of successes this year that I'd like to just talk a little bit about. Recently, we were successful in getting the City Commission to restrict approval of accessory dwelling units in single-family neighborhoods. We also added to the auditor's work plan some research and hopefully long-term planning for sidewalks and improving pedestrian facilities in Lawrence. We are working currently really hard to see the passage of rental registration and inspection, which has been a project that LAN has been working on for over 5 years to try and get the city to provide some enforcement and code oversight for rental properties. Right now, rental properties are only regulated if they're in single-family zoned neighborhoods. We would like to see that spread across all types of zoning throughout the city so that our rental stocks are safe and also that they protect the property value of single-family homeowners in Lawrence. Next slide, please. I'd like to talk a little bit about the role that neighborhoods play generally. And I'm probably preaching to the choir in terms of some of this stuff, but I feel really strongly that our community is, in sum total, really only as good as our neighborhoods are. And I think that the neighborhoods we have really represent the history and the vibrancy of our community. I'll give you all just a thought experiment to kind of consider as you look at the roles that neighborhoods have played. Let's say that there's a proposal to build a 150-unit apartment complex next to your home. You have concerns about light, noise, parking, blight, crime. What do? Who do you call? Neighborhood associations, again, born and strengthened in times of crisis. LAN was born out of a controversy around demolition of historic homes adjacent to what is now the Old West Lawrence neighborhood. In 2012, the East Lawrence neighborhood fought valiantly with LAN's help to restrict the height of the development at 9th and New Hampshire, the hotel that is currently being constructed. More recently, LAN publicly called for the Rock Chalk Park Rec Center project to go to a public vote, sadly to no avail. One of the things that I've been really grateful and amazed to watch is just to see the networking that has occurred within individual neighborhoods and also around the land table every month. We provide mutual aid. When one neighborhood is having a problem, other neighborhoods come to their aid. And sometimes that's in the form of actually going to City Hall and arguing with the commissioners, helping gather names on a petition, doing sort of phone calling for particular actions. We also saw during the straight line windstorm a couple of years ago how neighbors were helping each other, literally cutting down trees and clearing roads. So mutual aid is a big part of the role of neighborhoods in Lawrence. Next slide, please. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about some growth and development trends that are affecting neighborhoods. This is where things might start getting a little dicey in terms of my opinion, so I'll just throw that out there. You might want to cover your ears. In my opinion, growth is extending increasingly to the west and to the south, and it is having some deleterious impacts on the inner city core neighborhoods. Our population is growing a little bit. It's not huge. I think they probably thought at City Hall it was going to grow more than it has. I think it's interesting to note that 4 out of 5 sitting city commissioners live west of Iowa. And in my opinion, that has a pretty big impact on the kinds of decisions that are made. We are also increasingly seeing TIFs and TDDs, which is a transportation kind of tax abatement that is offered as an option for a variety of developments. These are increasingly being used as a form of subsidy. So equity is a big issue in my mind, and I'll give you a couple of examples that I think are really relevant as far as a trend goes. Recently, the city decided that they were going to remove, replace, and expand the sidewalks all along Wakarusa. Okay, so this is in West Lawrence. Right now, Wakarusa has sidewalks contiguous all the way from 23rd Street to 6th Street on both sides of the street. This is on city right-of-way, and they're totally passable. They're actually in relatively good shape. So they've decided they're not wide enough, they're not big enough, and not in good enough shape. They're tearing all of those sidewalks up and replacing them with what is functionally a rec path on both sides. Now, I'm a huge fan of sidewalks. Anybody that knows me knows that. Let me be real clear. But why is the city doing that when, where I live in the Centennial neighborhood, we don't even have sidewalks? I see women pushing baby carriages down Tennessee Street because there's nowhere to walk except the street. That's an equity issue, and it's an example of one of the trends that I see happening in Lawrence that I find disturbing. Another equity issue, and again, it's an east-west thing, and I've always been cautioned not to go there, but I can't help it because I live on the east side and I think it's relevant. Rock Chalk Park, the rec center that's being built out at the intersection of 6th and K10, is going to be larger than all other rec centers in our community combined. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the impacts of subsidizing what I consider to be, in some cases, unsustainable development. I'll just start by defining my understanding of sustainable development, which is development that provides environmental, economic, and social well-being for today and in the future. And I would just ask you to consider, as we talk about specific projects, whether or not what we're doing is sustainable. When we build giant apartment complexes, big box retail stores, huge amounts of parking, it has a cost to the current residents that are paying for it through their property tax bills. But it also represents money that we're not spending on other things that we need, like sidewalks or perhaps improvement in our drinking water, making sure we have a working drinking water intake in the river and so forth. I would also argue that the way that the city has developed has been very automotive-centric, and that has a public health impact. We are not encouraging people to get out of their cars. If anything, we're putting things further and further out and encouraging people to drive more and more. There are environmental impacts as well, and I am also a longtime environmental activist, so this is important to me. My talk today is somewhat timely in that construction on the South Lawrence traffic way began this morning. It is my personal opinion that this highway will be the biggest mistake this community has made in decades, if not a century, and it breaks my heart. Building wider roads and more highways is a source of the problems that we have as a community. It is not a solution. We are fragmenting needed habitat with our development. We are decreasing our resilience in the event of flooding or natural disaster, and we are exacerbating our automobile-dependent culture. My fear, and mark my words, I'll come back in 5 years and we can talk about it again, along the corridor of the South Lawrence Traffic Way, there will be even more sprawl. We will have big box stores, Taco Bells, gas stations, and parking lots. It will not make our community better, stronger, or safer. It will lessen us all. Next slide, please. I'd like to talk a little bit more about some common subsidies that are used for development and growth in Lawrence. One is a tax increment financing, and this is called a TIF commonly. We've seen this used at the Oriad Hotel, just right behind y'all across the street there. It was also used for the hotel project that is under construction at 9th, New Hampshire. According to the city's own economic development webpage, they define a TIF as something that supports projects that provide a substantial and significant public benefit to the community. I'll ask you, did our TIF investment at the Oriad and 9th in New Hampshire, is that really providing substantial public benefit? Because it's coming out of our tax dollars, so it's something that I think we need to think about. Another common source of subsidy for development and growth in Lawrence is the use of IRBs or industrial revenue bonds. And this was a big piece of the Rock Chalk Park Rec Center project. Again, let me give you the city's definition. Projects that enhance downtown Lawrence, promote infill, incorporate environmentally sustainable elements, provide other public benefits, and projects that support target industries, life sciences research, IT, aviation, aerospace, and value-added agriculture. I'll ask you, does the Rock Chalk Park Rec Center fulfill any of those objectives? I'll let you come to your own conclusion. So these are some examples of subsidized growth that receive tax abatements, TIFs, TDDs, industrial revenue bonds, and most of y'all are familiar with these. Again, I'll ask you, are we getting what we're paying for in terms of making our community a better place? Next slide, please. So again, my opinion, these are some better examples of public investments in our community. These are developments and policies that I think are really going to make Lawrence a better place, and I'm pretty excited about them. Not everybody agrees, and that's okay. The Polar Building is an apartment and kind of part of a mixed-use concept on the very far east side of town that provides some low and moderate income rental subsidies to artists. And it was a preservation project. They took an old building and turned it into a loft apartment. Renovation of the Carnegie Building, I am delighted with that. We use the basement of that building for a sidewalk meeting once a month. I think it really anchors downtown, and I'm a big fan of historic preservation. Farmland, we needed to do something. That was a blight, and I think that the city made the right decision to go ahead and just take over the cleanup and assume the cost of getting that back into some kind of functional use in the tax base. Pending preservation of the train depot, the folks that worked on that are to be commended. I think that they did a terrific job. Two policy changes that have come down the pike in the last couple of years that I am very excited about. One is the completion of the Complete Streets policy, which is to incorporate bicycles and pedestrians into our transportation planning. This is long overdue. We have a lot of work to implement it, but it's something that's very positive on the horizon. And as I talked about before, in rental registration and inspection, hopefully is going to pass. That meeting will be December 3rd at the City Commission, and certainly those of you all that are interested, feel free to talk to me afterwards and I can give you some more details. So here are some projects, development that's coming down the pike that we don't really know what the impacts are going to be. Now, these developments represent growth, to be sure, but at what cost? I would ask you to consider what role we can play as citizens and taxpayers to ensure that the public interest is served, particularly if there are going to be public subsidies in the form of tax abatements. I'd also ask that you consider how will these developments affect you, your family, your neighborhood, and your taxes. One comment that I've heard at land meetings recently is that we are proposing development out near where the Rock Chalk Park project is going to be. We're also proposing potentially development on South Iowa where the SLT will head through the wetlands. And the question that was raised in a meeting I was at the other day is, are we creating and potentially subsidizing competing developments? How much retail can our community really support? I want to talk just briefly about the police center, police station. They're talking about siting a very large, I think tens of millions of dollars, new police station to kind of bring together. We have multiple different police facilities throughout the community. And there are, I believe, 7 potential sites. These are available on the city's website. Again, if you're interested, I could talk to you a little bit more about it. But this is a big one that's coming down the pike, and I think those neighborhoods that are kind of in the crosshairs of where this facility may be sited should pay attention to it, because it's going to be, I think, a 13-acre camp complex is what I'm proposing. All right, so I'm going to give you the bad news first. Again, my opinion. This is the part of the talk that may get me into trouble. Development interests in this community heavily fund our city commission campaigns. And the Chamber of Commerce has a very strong embedded political arm that makes decisions about how our community develops, where our community develops, and what our community develops. Economic development generally, both the Chamber of Commerce, Leadership Lawrence, and there's a couple of different economic development entities receive public funding, okay? Our tax dollars pay them to do some of the things that they're doing. And not everybody's okay with that. My discomfort really comes down to, I don't believe the process is transparent. While we provide public subsidies to the Chamber of Commerce and economic development entities, I don't have the right to go to their meetings. I don't have the right to see their books. I don't necessarily have the right to get any kind of information about what kinds of decisions are being made behind closed doors with my tax dollars. In October of 2012, I submitted a memo to the City Commission about the 9th New Hampshire project. Specifically, I was concerned about the process by which that project was decided. The Historic Resources Commission voted unanimously to reject the initial proposal that Doug Compton and his development group put forth. That HRC ruling was overturned by the City Commission, and they proceeded to allow the building of a building that the neighborhood was very much against, because it would take all of the sunshine out of their backyards if they lived on Rhode Island Street. And then the city proceeded to add insult to injury and give them about a $20 million tax abatement. I had some real problems with how all that went down. So I thought, I'm going to try and find out a little bit more. I submitted a Kansas Open Records request, and I spent about $750 between copy costs and legal counsel, and got a whole bunch of correspondence between the developers and City Hall. And what I learned was really disturbing. The developers had undue access to city leaders, and they were provided resources that were not afforded to the neighborhood associations. When I presented this to the City Commission, crickets. And I, interestingly enough, went back to the city site to pull it up on the minutes just this morning to discover that, amazingly, that month's minutes are not available in the city's archives. My memo has disappeared. But I have a copy if you'd like to see it. So I would assert that some development interests do have preferential access at City Hall, and it's causing problems. The same development folks seem to be getting subsidies on a regular basis. Fritzl, Compton, Werner, Trainer, you see the same names over and over again. My question is, why don't we, the people that are paying for that, have real access to the decision-making process before our money is given away? And are we really getting what is in the best interest of our community? One final thing here that I think is really important as far as bad news that y'all need to be aware of is that the Brownback administration in the past year in our legislature changed historic resource rules in the state of Kansas significantly. And basically it removed about 50% of the historic listings in this community from a protected class. So if you live in an old home and you want to make sure that they don't build a Taco Bell next to your house, you may want to contact the city's historic resources staff person and get on the local registry, because the state registry that used to exist in many cases is no longer a protection for you. All right, so that's all really depressing, isn't it? Here's the good news. And this is the part that I'm really grateful to LAN for showing me, and for all of the people that I have worked with in the last year. There is increasing collaboration between City Hall, the neighborhood associations, and a number of other community groups. League of Women Voters and the Lawrence Pedestrian Coalition are the two I'll give a shout out to here. I think that City Hall really got beat up over Rock Chalk Park and 9th New Hampshire. And I think that they've started to listen maybe a little bit more to the neighborhoods when folks have concern. Increasingly, we're seeing developers actually go to the neighborhoods first, which is just a crazy idea, right? Before you break ground, how about if you talk to the people that live next door? In fact, I just got an email from the city clerk yesterday looking for a neighborhood contact for a developer to talk to. And some neighborhood associations are stronger than ever, and it makes me so pleased and happy to live in this community, to see people rise up and fight back when things aren't right. Pinckney Neighborhood Association did a beautiful mural tunnel project to their school this past year. East Lawrence is such a big and vibrant neighborhood, and they have just an amazingly active schedule of things that they're doing. Hillcrest is doing great stuff. Old West Lawrence, obviously. Even Centennial fought back tennis court lights this year and got the city commission to unanimously reject a proposal to put even more lighting in the big athletic complex that they have over at the old Centennial School. So that's good news. The neighborhoods are awake and they are paying attention. We have new community members moving to Lawrence all the time. By definition, this is kind of a transient community, and those community members are active, and I'm grateful to see that. We also have a couple of new groups that have added to the culture of the neighborhoods and the community in the last year. Percolator, which is a little art space just behind where the 9th and New Hampshire Hotel is going to be built, and Lawrence Creates. If you're not familiar with those and you'd like to learn more, please let me know. As I said earlier, Complete Streets and the Transportation 2040 are both great opportunities for folks in neighborhoods and who are concerned about sustainable development to have a positive impact on decisions that are going to be made related to specifically bicycles, pedestrian access, and making sure that you don't get run down when you're trying to cross the street. Ultimately, I think that the Rock Chalk Rec Center Park, of all things that have happened in the 10 years I've lived in this town, really raised awareness amongst neighborhoods and this community about the problems that we have related to transparency and public incentive or abatement issues at City Hall. A lot of people were upset about the process that the city went through, and I don't think that they're going to hemorrhage that kind of political capital again without thinking about it. So, in closing, I'd just like to talk a little bit about what I believe we